Hi, my name is the Chaos Warlock. I have what's known as Dissociative Identity Disorder. I'm also autistic and have ADHD, been diagnosed. I have complex PTSD. This channel is going to go on an adventure. A lot has happened since 2025 and 2024. We're on a healing journey. I'll go over the basics of what D.I.D is like and go from there. The best theory is I think it's called the deconstruction theory or structuralized theory. And basically, it's the idea that when you're a child, you don't have fully formed sense of self. It's more like in separate containers. And as you grow up, you slowly integrate these containers into each other to form a coherent sense of identity. Now, with some people, it can happen where that doesn't happen. And the most popular theory is that trauma interceded and interrupted that process. And that's why you end up with separate containers of identity form into full personalities of their own self, sense of self. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward and clear. There is a lot of disagreement about D.I.D. First off, it is real. No, it's not for attention. It is not rare. That's a myth. It is not as extreme as you see on TV shows, although every D.I.D system is different. Not everybody has what's known as disorganized plurality. Plural just meaning many. And not a lot of people will identify as plural, and not a lot of people will identify as D.I.D. It just depends on the trauma involved, depends on if you remember the trauma at all. Some people don't remember the trauma. Some systems do not have a single coherent main personality. Instead, they have just a bunch of different selves. That's it. And there is the thought that these different identities are their own human being, essentially, in your body. And for us, in particular, we don't have a single identity. We are a council or committee of different, what's known as host alters, who weigh in on decisions on our life, and we all have to come to a consensus together. So these containers that I'm talking about that don't integrate into the single personality, they can develop into their own personality or being. For instance, ones that develop like a full personality, interests, likes, dislikes, movies, they have maybe their own birth date, they have their own color, they like their own music, they are their own being. Those are known as alters or alternate personalities, and they're very real. They're not just a imaginary friend syndrome thing or an alter ego, which are completely different things. Jessica Clark actually had D.I.D. She's now an integrated system, but if you go to her Multiplicity and I think, channel, she has a really great video on describing dissociative identity disorder and what it's like and all the different types of alters and stuff like that. I'm just going to go briefly over it so that we can get to the next part. So, alters that front more often, more commonly, are known as host alters. A lot of systems prefer to be called alters. Sometimes they have different names. So, host alters are the ones that are out the most. And for us, we have a very large system. We're known as polyfragmented D.I.D. It just basically just means it's not an official term, unfortunately, but it is the best term. I wish they would have put it in DSM-5 and they didn't, which is the manual that all therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists use in America. There's also the ICD-11. I think we might be on ICD-12 now. I'm not sure on that. Don't quote me on that. But the ICD-11 is from Europe, And it actually is more comprehensive and has actually more details about different disorders and stuff like that. I actually think it's more comprehensive and better than currently. And there is other types of what's known as alternate personalities. So there is animal alters. So you can have an alter that is anthropomorphic kind of animal, where it's like a cat human, like cat folk, tiger person, or you can have like an actual cat or dog or shark, fish. Then there is types of alters that are known as introjects. Now, introjects is a term for outside people who somehow got absorbed into your system and became their own like alter. And introjects can often be abusive because a lot of times we go through abusive relationships and we absorb the abusive person within our own system. And then you get an introject known as a prosecutor. Now, prosecutor alters are not evil alters, they're not bad, they're doing bad things. We like to clarify on that. So there is prosecutor alters. Now, basically, the concept is this alter was put in a position where they were perhaps holding trauma, and instead of rising up and being a hero or a protector, as they're known, they kind of went the other route. And they're still protecting, but they're doing it in an unhealthy way. And they have bad coping skills. And they're often harming the main body or other people around them. And prosecutors get a bad rap. A lot of times they just need time to process their trauma and work through it. Then there are protector alternate personalities or alters. Protectors sometimes can be overbearing because they're like a helicopter parent in some ways. Their job is to protect the system from danger and from threats. And a lot of times this is a sort of nurturing, protective nature, but sometimes it can be, like I said, overbearing. Sometimes they can alienate people, they can attack people even, or them or their own system. And so protectors can sometimes not always do the right thing too. But they're a little bit more about like safety and grounding as I've seen, and they're generally not abusive at all. So prosecutors can be abusive, and that can be worked on. So can introjects, but introjects itself doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be abusive. Then there's also demon alters. So that's someone who's gone through like religious trauma or has been raised in a religious environment. Oftentimes will adapt to religious, experiences and may end up having demonic alters. It doesn't mean that they're an actual demon. It just means that they are demonic in nature. Maybe it's because of the religious trauma. It depends. There can also be the opposite, which is angel alters. There can also be godlike or gods and goddesses type alters who embody, the gods from Greek mythology or Norse mythology. Then there is inanimate object type alters who can be like a pen, a sword, a weapon, a toaster, purse, jewelry. Strange one, but it is part of D.I.D. There can also be body parts, which is a funny one and a weird one, ignoring all the fart jokes and stuff like that. We only have a eye. It's a lidless eye with a tendril that walks around. It's I don't know how to explain it. Sometimes it's weird. D.I.D is weird. And then there is alters that can be for specific purposes. So for instance, you can have sexual alters. They are alters that contain all sexual knowledge, even sexual trauma. They might just be only for those types of sexual situations. There is history slash secretary alters who sort of like do paperwork, business, like going to a job, the work personality, if you want to call it that. And then let's see if there's anything else I should mention. A lot of people have different types alters. Oh, you can have teenage alters, so alters that are under a certain age. You can have child alters, which is very difficult to deal with at times and has to be handled with care. Anybody under the age of 18 is a child to me in some ways. We do try to keep separate categories, just so we don't offend the teenagers in the system. And then I guess the last thing I'll say is you can sometimes have what's known as dead alters. Now, these alters are not, how do I explain? You can't kill alters or delete them. You can't. It's scientifically proven that you cannot. What you try to delete will just pop back up later on. That's called baggage that just hid away. So that's not great. You don't want to do that. Sometimes these alters can be zombies, they can be undead, they can be shades, they can be ghosts. So we've had a situation where an alter tried to murder another one, and they became a ghost. The mind is a beautiful, amazing machine. And there are things about the brain that even scientists still don't know. That's why therapy as well as medication is not always accurate or helpful, because we don't know enough about the brain to even address a lot of the issues that pop up. And a lot of people do not understand DID and do not handle it with care and are tone deaf, in my opinion, and disrespectful and rude and downright hurtful and abusive even to people with DID. And that is very important to say that we are people who are just different people in one body. That's it. Multiplicity or polarity or DID, whatever you want to call it, is just a different way of being. That's it. And a lot of us do have trauma. We have complex trauma at that. While trauma is not an excuse for shitty behavior, it's also a great explanation for why something's happening. Just like any other disorder, like bipolar disorder or M.P.D, sometimes life happens and shitty things happen, and it's not your fault. Sometimes, even when you didn't do it intentionally, you still have to deal with the consequences of the actions and just try and learn from it. That's life. So I think I've covered everything I can. So how our system works is we have an inner world. That's a separate thing. So some people do not have an inner world. We do. We have a whole universe within our head. We call it the Mythica Neurixian universe. And our main planet doesn't have a name. I think it's Algaia. Algaia. I don't know. We're still working on the name. And we have main continents and everything that Earth does. We consider it a different plane from existence. We have the main island where we all live in what's known as the D.I.D house. We each have our own separate rooms. Some people are in relationships, and that's creepy to people and weird, and it shouldn't be. That's just whatever. I mean, I just don't see any issue with it. I do have to say that boundaries are super important for learning within and without. So within the system, we actually have apartments and houses and castles and different places that we go. And we have boundaries with that we've established over time, as well as establishing outside boundaries for what's known as fronting. So when someone takes over, it's not like possession. A lot of times it could be a forced switch. So for instance, right now, who is fronting is, oh gosh, fuck. Who am I? See, that's another thing with dissociation. Sometimes you don't know who you are. So I believe I am Arlo. Hi. I'm one of the council members. My full name is Arlo Tails and Bladewin, aka Blackstrike. That's my nickname. He, him pronouns, they, them's also okay. I'm a half dragon who's also a vampire. Long story. Half black dragon. Let's see, what else? Boundaries with age limits is very important. It's been well established within our system. We do have childhood trauma. I'm just going to say that. We've been working through it for a while. Unfortunately, when you go through childhood trauma, it's not just a one and done thing. It's an over the time periods of processing and reprocessing and trying to untangle all the bad negative messages that you were given by careless caregivers who are abusive maybe, or even cruel. That's something that we've been processing for a long time, and we continue to work on it every day. We never give up and never surrender. I love the Galaxy Quest quote. So, in a world, we have established a council to deal with our problems in our daily life. I'm one of the council members. I'm not the main guy. There is no main guy. Let's just be clear on that. Okay. I am kind of the flagship captain, tentatively. But one time there was a person named Kieran who took over the system and said, I'm in charge, to burnt themselves out. We don't do that anymore. So now we're just a bunch of different people who take turns, what's called fronting. So when someone fronts, think of it as a car. So when someone's driving this car, so like right here, we call that the command ship. So we have a ship in a world that orbits the planet that we all live on. Some of us do. There's other planets too, and galaxies and stuff like that. This ship that we all ride in when we're fronting is where we go to come out. And we have what's known as the captain's chair. And sometimes there's other chairs next to it. So imagine a driver with multiple chairs that also drive too, to kind of assist. And there are some people who will friend together and they'll be in the same chair. So hopefully this explains some things. I'm just going over this briefly. If you need more information, we will be doing a dissociative identity disorder series like we did before, except this time we're going to be a lot more thorough and more clarifying on things to try and help people understand this. We went through some really shitty experiences in 2025. We're still reeling from. And a lot of it was not our fault. For instance, we were smoking weed to try and help with our pain levels because weed has been statistically shown to help with pain situations. And sometimes you can get the wrong strain of weed and then that can cause issues. And that's exactly what happened. We have been checked multiple times for many different disorders. We have what's known as alexithymia, and that's where you have emotional blindness. It's not that you don't acknowledge other people's emotions or your own, it's that you don't always know what they are. You can't always put into words what that emotion is or how to explain it to other people so they can understand. You can always work on that too. It takes a lot of like therapy and processing and working on identifying emotions to get to a place where the alexithymia is no longer causing as many issues. And that's what we're working on. In a way to deal with healing, because we're not getting good therapy. We have never gotten good therapy, except for like one or two therapists. Unfortunately, a lot of therapists are very harmful to D.I.D systems and people with trauma, and they don't really understand and they're not empathetic at all. That's the reality of America. So for us, we've had to take our healing by the reins. And so this year, we are trying to work through our trauma, actually, on our own. Fuck it. We're going to do it ourselves. So we looked at the different types of therapies. We basically found that there's something called narrative therapy. Now, narrative therapy is where you basically take a past situation that you went through and you rewrite it. You also examine it and try to see like what you could have done differently, what you learned from it. And it's a way to process the trauma or the past memory issue that popped up or situation, and get to a place from pain and trauma to healing. And I really like narrative therapy because I'm an artist, I'm creative, I'm a writer, I'm a poet. I do a lot of creative things, and this is right up my alleyway. And I also love Dungeons and Dragons. And so my system and I put together this idea of why don't we write a story to deal with our trauma and entertain people at the same time. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to take past situations that we've been through. We're going to change the names on people. We're going to make them into D&D characters or whatever and make a story where we process this trauma through a narrative therapy plot. And that's the premise. And while we're doing this, we're also trying to work on ways to help America. And I feel like something in this is super valuable for everybody, ourselves included, especially. So that's where we're at. We will introduce each of us alters, we prefer cohorts. We don't like being called parts or substates. That's disrespectful and rude. A lot of systems do not like to be called parts. We prefer cohorts. We wrote a story on our blog trying to do this, and I'm going to read the story to you. I hope you enjoy this series. The quest to restore balance. I think I like that. See you in the next video.
Artlist.io